You don't belong here. Now tell me whose car you're stripping before I lose my patience.
I've already told you. This is my home and my car. I don't need to show you anything.
Oh, that's cute. Look, friend, I'm not running circles with you.
Greenwich, Connecticut. 4:45 p.m. The silence of an ultra-wealthy neighborhood is shattered by chaos. It started with a single phone call. A neighbor reported a suspicious black male stripping parts off a vintage Mustang. She saw the dirty clothes, she saw the skin color, and she assumed the worst. But the man in the grease-stained burgundy jersey wasn't a thief. He was Elijah Bennett, a retired NFL legend and the owner of the $15 million estate. What you are about to see is a brutal display of racial profiling that cost Deputy Miller his career and forced the city to pay a historic $6.2 million settlement. This is the story of how one officer's prejudice led to his absolute destruction. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you are watching from right now. Whether you're in the US, the UK, Canada, Africa, or anywhere else in the world, I want to hear from you. And if you're new, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you stories like this. Now, let's get back to what happened. To understand the magnitude of the catastrophic mistake about to unfold, you must first understand the man beneath the grease and the grime. At first glance, the figure standing in the driveway looked like nothing more than hired help, perhaps a mechanic working off the books to make ends meet. He was dressed in a faded, oil-stained burgundy football jersey, the white number 88 cracking and peeling off the chest. His light blue denim shorts were frayed at the edges, and his feet were shoved into a pair of battered, muddy Nike Air Jordan 1s with the laces dragging on the concrete. His hands were completely black with motor oil, gripping a heavy silver wrench as he leaned intently over the engine block of a classic 1967 Mustang Shelby GT 500. But appearances in Greenwich, Connecticut can be a fatal deception. This was Elijah Bennett, a name that commands instant silence and respect in boardrooms across the state. To the locals, he is a living legend, a former NFL linebacker who spent 12 years crushing quarterbacks on the field before retiring to build a real estate empire that effectively reshaped the city's skyline. Elijah wasn't just a resident, he was the heartbeat of the community. He was the primary donor for the local high school's new library and the man who quietly sponsored the very police athletic league that the local precinct relied on for their public image. He was a man of immense discipline and integrity, known for his calm demeanor and his sharp intellect. He didn't need to wear a bespoke three-piece suit to prove his worth or signal his status. In the sanctuary of his own home, on the property he paid $15 million for, he had earned the absolute right to get his hands dirty. He was enjoying a rare afternoon of peace, restoring the car he had dreamed of since he was a child. But to an outsider looking through the lens of prejudice, none of this history, power, or prestige was visible. The officer speeding toward the property didn't see a philanthropist, a father, or a business tycoon. He saw a stereotype. He saw a threat. And he had absolutely no idea that he was about to try and intimidate a man who had built a legendary career on never backing down. The lion was resting in his den, and a jackal was about to make the worst decision of his life by walking right through the front gate. The silence of the afternoon was shattered not by a siren, but by the aggressive crunch of tires on gravel. Deputy Miller's patrol car didn't pull up, it lunged into the driveway, blocking the exit. He stepped out of the vehicle, not with the demeanor of a public servant, but with the posture of a predator. His hand was already hovering dangerously close to his holster, his fingers twitching. His Oakley sunglasses hid his eyes, stripping away any humanity from the interaction. Miller surveyed the scene and saw exactly what he wanted to see. He didn't see a homeowner enjoying a hobby. He saw a large black man in a dirty burgundy jersey and ripped shorts, holding a tool near an expensive vehicle. In Miller's mind, the narrative was already written. This was a theft in progress. He didn't announce himself. He didn't ask a polite question. He simply barked, "Step away from the vehicle." Now, Elijah Bennett stopped turning the wrench. He didn't jump. He didn't run. He slowly straightened his back, towering over the hood of the Mustang. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag with a deliberate, terrifying calmness. He looked the deputy in the eye and asked a simple question. "Can I help you, officer?" This was the test. Elijah could have immediately said, "I am Elijah Bennett. I own this house." He could have ended the tension in seconds, but he chose not to. He wanted to see if his rights existed without his title. He wanted to know if a black man in America needed a suit and tie just to be treated with basic human dignity in his own driveway. Miller failed the test instantly. He took Elijah's question as an act of defiance. To him, confidence from a man who looked like this wasn't rights, it was resistance. "I asked you a question." Miller shouted, closing the distance. his voice echoing off the stone walls of the mansion. "Whose car is this? And don't you lie to me." The absurdity was palpable. A thief doesn't calmly wipe grease from his hands in broad daylight. A thief doesn't ask if he can help the police. But bias is blind to logic. Miller demanded ID, not because he had a crime, but because he couldn't believe this man belonged here. Ask yourself this. If you were standing in your own driveway, minding your own business, and a stranger with a gun demanded you prove you lived there, would you stay calm? Or would you be outraged? Tell me in the comments below what you would do in Elijah's shoes. Miller was pushing for a reaction, and he was about to make the mistake of a lifetime. Protocol vanished. Reason evaporated. In the blink of an eye, Deputy Miller abandoned his oath to protect and serve, replacing it with a tyrannical urge to dominate and destroy. He didn't see a citizen standing on his own property. He saw a target that needed to be neutralized. When Elijah calmly repeated, "I have told you, I live here, and I am not showing you ID until you tell me what crime I have committed," Miller snapped. It was a complete psychological break. "That's it. Drop the weapon. Drop it now," Miller screamed, his voice cracking with adrenaline. He didn't wait for compliance. He didn't wait for a response. He lunged forward, closing the gap with terrifying speed. Elijah, holding the wrench down at his side, barely had time to raise his empty hand in a gesture of surrender before Miller collided with him. The officer slammed into the retired linebacker, using his full body weight to tackle him, but Elijah was a mountain of a man. He didn't fall immediately. This enraged Miller even further. He kicked Elijah's legs out from under him, forcing the massive man down onto the sharp, unforgiving gravel of the driveway. The sound was sickening, a heavy thud followed by the scrape of skin against stone. "Stop resisting! Stop fighting me!" Miller yelled, creating a false narrative for the radio recorder on his shoulder, even though Elijah was lying perfectly still, face down in the dirt. Miller jammed his knee into the center of Elijah's back, twisting the man's arm behind him with excessive, punitive force. The wrench clattered across the pavement, skidding away uselessly. "You're done. You hear me? You are done," Miller hissed into Elijah's ear, his spit flying as he ratcheted the handcuffs too tight. The metal bit into Elijah's wrists, cutting off circulation. But the violation didn't stop at the assault. Miller proceeded to violate the Fourth Amendment with reckless abandon. He roughly shoved his hands into Elijah's pockets, ripping the fabric of the vintage shorts. He snatched Elijah's phone and wallet, tossing them onto the hood of the Mustang with contempt. "Look at this." Miller sneered, seeing the cash in the wallet. "Drug money? Stolen? We're going to find out." He was profiling, assuming, and condemning, all in real time. He called Elijah scum and garbage, words that would later haunt him in a federal courtroom. But amidst this chaos, amidst the dust and the shouting, Miller missed the one detail that would seal his fate. High above the garage door, hidden discreetly under the eaves, the red light of a 4K wide-angle security camera was blinking steadily. The eye of God was recording every kick, every slur, and every illegal search in high-definition audio and video. Miller thought he was in control, but he was actually starring in the evidence video that would end his life as he knew it. The trap was sprung, and he was already caught. The gravel crunched again, signaling the arrival of a second patrol car. Deputy Miller stood over Elijah, his chest heaving with a false sense of victory. He smirked, believing his backup had arrived to help him haul this criminal away. He looked down at the man he had pinned to the dirt and sneered, "Your ride to the station is here. Hope you like prison food." Sergeant Kowalski, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for being tough but fair, stepped out of the cruiser. He adjusted his belt, scanning the scene. He saw the classic Mustang, the scattered tools, and his junior deputy standing triumphantly over a handcuffed suspect. But as Kowalski walked closer, his eyes narrowed. He stopped dead in his tracks. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. "Miller," the sergeant's voice was low, trembling not with fear, but with pure disbelief. "Miller, step away from him. Right. Now." Miller looked confused, his arrogance still blinding him. "Sarge, I caught him stripping the car. He resisted. I had to take him down." "You idiot!" Kowalski roared, his voice cracking like a whip across the driveway. "That is not a thief. That is Elijah Bennett." The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Miller froze. His eyes darted from the sergeant to the man on the ground. Bennett? The name echoed in his mind. The Bennett who donated the new tactical gear for the precinct? The Bennett who owned the stadium? Miller's gaze drifted slowly, painfully, to the wallet he had carelessly thrown onto the hood of the Mustang. With shaking hands, Miller reached out and flipped the wallet open. There it was. The driver's license next to a Platinum American Express card. Elijah Bennett. Address: 1200 Highland Drive. This address, this house, this car. The transformation was instant and brutal. The arrogance evaporated from Miller's face, replaced by a ghost-like pallor. His skin turned a sickly shade of white. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The predator had just realized he had attacked a lion. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably, the keys to the handcuffs rattling against his belt as he fumbled to retrieve them. He had just assaulted one of the most powerful men in the state because he didn't like his outfit. Miller dropped to his knees, not to pray, but to unlock the cuffs. His fingers were slippery with sweat. "Mr. Bennett, I didn't know, I thought," he stammered, his voice reduced to a pathetic whisper. Elijah stood up slowly, rubbing his bruised wrists. He didn't scream. He didn't hit back. He simply looked down at the terrified deputy with a gaze of cold, absolute judgment. The silence was deafening. Miller looked up, pleading with his eyes, but he found no mercy there. He saw only the reflection of his own career ending in disgrace. Do you feel satisfied seeing this bully finally crumble? Let me know in the comments if you think he deserves what's coming next. The power had shifted, and for Deputy Miller, the nightmare was just beginning. The sun hadn't even set over the Greenwich Hills before the wolves arrived. But this time, they weren't wearing badges. They were wearing $3,000 Italian suits. Elijah Bennett didn't just call a lawyer. He summoned Arthur Sterling, a civil rights attorney known in legal circles as the Shark. Within an hour, the quiet police precinct was turned into a war zone of litigation and forensic scrutiny. The chief of police, a man who usually projected absolute authority, sat in his office sweating through his shirt. On the large monitor on the wall, the footage from Elijah's 4K security camera played in a loop. The quality was irrefutable. Every pixel was a damning indictment of Deputy Miller's career. The room was silent, save for the recorded sound of Miller screaming, "Stop resisting," at a man who was clearly standing still with his hands open. Internal Affairs didn't just knock on the door, they kicked it down. Leading the charge was Special Agent Reynolds from the Department of Justice. The involvement of a federal agency signaled that this was no longer a local dispute. It was a civil rights crisis. They juxtaposed Miller's written police report against the video evidence. The report claimed Elijah was aggressive, lunging, and reaching for a weapon. The video showed a calm homeowner asking a polite question. The discrepancy wasn't just an error, it was perjury. It was a criminal lie written on official government documents. But the investigation didn't stop at the driveway. Agent Reynolds ordered a complete audit of Deputy Miller's entire history on the force. This is where the story turned from a single incident into a horrifying pattern of systemic abuse. They cracked open sealed files and dismissed complaints from the last 4 years. What they found was a graveyard of buried justice. The investigators discovered the file of Terrence Hill, a 19-year-old college student who Miller had arrested 2 years prior for loitering while waiting for a bus. Then there was the case of Marcus Cole, a delivery driver Miller had detained for 45 minutes because his music was too loud. In every single instance, the victims were black men. In every single instance, the Bodycam footage had conveniently malfunctioned or been corrupted, but they couldn't corrupt Elijah's private server. The investigation also widened to include the neighbor, Mrs. Higgins. Phone records revealed she had called 911 times in the last 6 months, always reporting suspicious characters who turned out to be landscapers, delivery men, or jogging neighbors. The audio of her call was played for the investigators. Her voice wasn't fearful, it was malicious. She explicitly stated, "He doesn't look like he belongs here," a phrase that would become the centerpiece of the hate crime enhancement charges. The system that was designed to protect Miller was now cannibalizing him. The police union, usually quick to defend their own, went silent. They saw the footage. They saw the public outrage brewing on social media where the clip had already garnered 10 million views. They knew there was no defending the indefensible. Miller was sitting in an interrogation room down the hall, stripped of his badge and his gun, watching his reflection in the two-way mirror. He wasn't just a cop anymore. He was a suspect in a federal investigation. The hunter had become the prey, and the evidence was piling up like dirt on a grave. The investigation proved that this wasn't just a bad day for a good cop, it was a typical day for a bad one. And this time, he had picked the wrong victim. The gavel struck the mahogany sound block with the force of a thunderclap, signaling the end of Deputy Miller's freedom and the beginning of a new era for Greenwich. The courtroom was packed to capacity, the air thick with anticipation. For months, Miller's defense team had tried to paint him as a stressed officer making a split-second mistake. But the jury didn't buy it. They had seen the footage, they had seen the arrogance, and now they demanded accountability. When the foreman read the verdict, Miller didn't cry. He simply stared blankly at the wall, his soul seemingly leaving his body. Guilty on all counts: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, deprivation of rights under color of law, and filing a false police report. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for corruption, looked down at the disgraced former deputy over her spectacles. She delivered a sentence that sent shockwaves through the police union. "You were entrusted with a badge to protect the citizens of this community," she declared, her voice echoing in the silent room. "Instead, you used it as a license to terrorize. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut on Miller's wrists was the ultimate poetic justice. The very tools he had used to illegally detain an innocent man were now the instruments of his own captivity. As the bailiffs led him away, he wasn't wearing his crisp tan uniform or his intimidating sunglasses. He was wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit, shuffling in shackles past the very community he had sworn to serve. He didn't look up. The shame was absolute. But justice didn't stop with the officer. Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor whose prejudice ignited this firestorm, faced her own reckoning. She was charged with filing a false emergency report and harassment. To pay the punitive damages awarded to Elijah in a civil suit, she was forced to sell the very home she thought she was protecting from him. She left the neighborhood not as a hero, but as a pariah, bankrupt and disgraced. Then came the settlement. The city, desperate to avoid further public humiliation, agreed to pay Elijah Bennett the historic sum of $6.2 million. It was a staggering amount of money, enough to retire on twice over. The cameras flashed wildly as Elijah stood on the courthouse steps, the settlement check in his hand. The reporters shouted questions, asking what luxury car or mansion he would buy next. Elijah stepped up to the microphone, the check fluttering in the breeze. He looked at the cameras with the same calm intensity he had shown in his driveway. "This money was paid for pain," he said quietly, "and I will not profit from pain." In a move that stunned the nation, Elijah announced that every single cent of the $6.2 million would be donated to establish the Bennett Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for indigent victims of police brutality. He didn't keep a dime. He turned his victimization into a shield for others. He won the war, and then he gave away the spoils. The story of Elijah Bennett is not merely a tale of one man's vindication. It is a mirror held up to society, forcing us to confront the ugly reality of bias that still lurks in our neighborhoods. Deputy Miller looked at a man restoring a car and saw a criminal, simply because he could not conceive of a world where a black man in a jersey could own a mansion. He made a judgment based on appearance, and that judgment cost him his freedom. It serves as a chilling reminder that prejudice is not just a moral failing. It is a dangerous blindness that can destroy lives on both sides of the badge. True power was not displayed by the man with the gun, the handcuffs, or the qualified immunity. True power was displayed by the man who remained calm while being assaulted, who used the law to dismantle a corrupt system, and who then used his fortune to ensure no one else would have to fight alone. Elijah Bennett proved that dignity is not something you wear, it is something you are. He stripped the department of its arrogance and replaced it with a legacy of reform. Let this case serve as a stark, unyielding warning to those who believe a uniform grants them the right to oppress. The world is watching, the cameras are rolling, and the days of operating in the shadows are over. If you violate the oath, if you let hate dictate your actions, you will be exposed, you will be prosecuted, and you will be erased from the profession you disgraced. Justice may be slow, but as we saw today, it is inevitable. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice should be blind to color and that integrity matters more than a title, please hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that exposes the truth. We are building a community here that demands accountability, and don't click away just yet. We have another incredible story on the screen right now about a judge who was arrested in her own courtroom by a rookie cop who didn't recognize her. Click the video on your screen now to see how that unfolded. I'll see you there.